This is episode 481 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined by Zack Fort of the New Mexico Shooting Sports Association. We'll be talking about gun rights in the New Mexico Legislature for the next 40 or so minutes. Zack, welcome back to Tipping Point, New Mexico.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Shooting Sports Association and your role in it before we get started.
Yes, so New Mexico Shooting Sports Association is a 501c4 organization based in New Mexico. We've existed since 1935. A lot of what this organization does today is focusing on being a voice for by New Mexicans for New Mexicans to lobby for our right to own a firearm under both the United States Constitution and the state constitution of New Mexico, because we have that right there in Section 2, Article 6 of the state constitution. So that's a lot of what we do. My role today is I am the legislative affairs officer, I guess past president and treasurer. So couple different hats there, but I handle a lot of, the day-to-day stuff with our legislative advocacy and outreach efforts.
Yeah, you've been around doing this for quite a while. What got you interested in being an advocate for gun rights? And are you some kind of, paid shill? From what I understand, you volunteer a heck of a lot of your time towards defending gun rights in New Mexico, but set the record straight.
So I have not made any money doing this. In fact, I've lost quite a bit of money doing this because just the amount of unreimbursed expenses and things like that. So I've lost. This is, advocating for gun rights is not a money-making proposition. So if you want to make money, that's not you're not going to do it. I am a volunteer. I've never been paid. Our board, we're all volunteers. So we're just people who care about our rights. I've been involved politically for a number of years, and it's an issue I care deeply about. And I think there was a real need for someone to kind of step into that role and kind of to be a leader in that organization. To spearhead a lot of these legislative efforts, because really when I got involved right around back in 2018, 2019 is about when we really saw things change in New Mexico for the worse. We went from good governors in terms of gun rights. We had a number of pro-gun Democrat governors to all of a sudden you have a very anti-gun Democrat governor and an anti-gun legislature. So there was a real rapid shift, and I think there was a big need for it. So I kind of stepped into that role and kind of grew this organization into what it is today.
Yeah, and real quick, kind of as we get this conversation started, we're just past the halfway point of the 2023 legislative session, but you have been at this for a very long time. And I'm also old enough to remember when Bill Richardson, for example, received the NRA's endorsement for not one, but two of his election campaigns. Democrats in New Mexico were often on par with, or at least acted on par with, Republicans in terms of their support for gun rights. What is causing this sudden shift, or maybe not so sudden shift, but talk about the philosophical shift around guns in the New Mexico legislature?
So I think what's happened in New Mexico is a little bit of a reflection of what's happened nationally on this issue. And really what's kind of changed is you've had these very large special interest groups like, the Michael Bloombergs of the world have been putting a lot of money to really transform the Democratic Party on the issue. And I think it actually ties in a number of different areas where Michael Bloomberg, what he sought to do is try to transform the Democratic Party into what he thinks it should be. And he's kind of used these gun control advocates to do that. And so what we've seen is this really rapid shift where they spent a lot of money attacking pro-gun Democrats to try and primary them. And, they attack them on any issue. It's not, even though they're a anti-gun organization, they attack them on abortion, they attack them on guns, they attack them on healthcare, where you just seen this really marked shift in kind of these big donors trying to reshape the Democratic Party and make it really hard to be a pro-gun Democrat. So it's really been kind of the shift within the Democratic Party that's happened not only in New Mexico but nationally as well, to really push out those more conservative Democrats and kind of bring in this new progressive ideology, this new progressive breed, if you will, of Democrats that we've really seen kind of take over in a lot of different areas in the Democratic Party. So it's been part of that larger shift. I think there's some ideological there's some ideological inconsistencies with some of the progressives and the way they view guns and gun rights. But that I'm probably preaching to the choir right now, and ideological inconsistencies among the progressives.
Yeah, well, we can certainly talk a little bit about that in this conversation, but let's get down to it. As we stand here now, again, just past the halfway mark of the 2023 legislative session. This is the 60-day session, which at least in today's iteration of the legislature remains the long session, the open session. And there's a whole bunch of anti-gun bills. I don't know if there's any pro-gun bills, but if there are, you can let us know. And we're going to try to stick to mostly active bills that are moving through the session. And let's just get to it. We've talked in person about some of these, but at this point, just take it away on some of these bills.
Yeah, so there was a pro-gun bill that we supported. It was a constitutional carry bill. We knew that it was an uphill battle, and sure enough, its first committee was tabled really without much debate. So at this time, there's really no pro-gun bills that are still in play in the legislature right now. So we do support them, but it's a very heavy lift to move them anywhere right now. So starting with kind of the two bills that have made it the furthest, which the first one is House Bill 9. And this is kind of a version of these mandatory storage firearm owner liability bills that we've seen in a lot of different iterations over the last couple of years. So the version that we have today is in House Bill 9. Really what it is, it's a firearm owner liability bill. So it doesn't it doesn't tell you have to store your firearms with a lock and no ammunition in it the way some bills do. It really just says it imposes criminal penalties after something has happened. The issue we take with something like this, because we all believe in responsible gun ownership or responsible storage. The issue we take with this bill is that the actions of a third party could result in criminal charges for the gun owner, even if they did everything responsibly. So what I mean by that is the bill says if a minor uses your firearm to commit a crime or injure someone, the gun owner can be charged with a crime. However, it doesn't say exactly about what if a third party, an unrelated third party, is the one who actually provides the firearm to the minor. So you could have someone who is a gun owner, the gun is in their house, their cousin, who is a legal adult, takes that firearm, gives it to a minor, knowing the minor may do something to hurt themselves. The minor does something to hurt themselves with a firearm, but it would be the gun owner who is criminally charged, even if they had taken reasonable steps to secure that firearm. So that's the issue we take with that bill, is you could be charged criminally because the actions of a third party. That's something, it would create effectively a new type of crime in New Mexico, because there's all types, there's civil statutes about negligence and things like that, but now you're looking at creating this new type of third party criminal charges. So that bill, it passed the floor of the House. It was actually closer than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. It was 37-32 on the floor of the House when it passed. It's currently sitting in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So that bill is kind of the furthest along of any of the bills that it did go through two House committees, passed there, then passed the floor of the House. So that's
this is
kind of the bill that's the furthest
HB 9, correct?
Yes, HB 9.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that one is one that, of course, was directly related to some recent events in Albuquerque. And, while, gun storage, and we all want to ensure that guns are stored safely, I should say. it's a lot tougher to enact legislation that doesn't infringe people's rights and tries to do everything that the advocates would like to accomplish with their pieces of legislation. So that's definitely an important bill. So it's passed the House and is now in Senate Judiciary. So that one's definitely ahead of the curve, I guess. All right, next bill up.
So the next bill that's kind of made it the furthest is Senate Bill 44. And what Senate Bill 44 is, it bans carrying a firearm within 100 feet of a polling station when voting is taking place. The bill is part of this larger package from Senator Peter Wirth about, they're calling it quote unquote election security or something like that. So it's part of this larger package because there's other bills that deal with like creating new crimes of threat to poll workers or stuff like that. The Senate Bill 44 would ban the carrying of firearms, both open and concealed, within 100 feet of a polling station while voting is taking place. So it effectively kind of creates a new quote unquote gun-free zone where polling stations are. And the justification from the sponsors is they claim, I mean, I don't know if this has or hasn't happened, that people are carrying firearms to intimidate people at polling places. But then when amendments were proposed to that bill to only ban the open carry of firearms, to still allow someone who has a valid concealed carry permit to carry a firearm, those amendments were rejected. So I don't really think that this is about intimidation, because you're not intimidating anybody if you're concealed carrying, because people don't know you have a gun. It's kind of the point of concealed carrying. So we don't really buy the story that this is about kind of intimidation of poll workers. It's just kind of an attempt that they see an opening to kind of create a new gun-free zone is really what they're doing with this bill. Because like I said, if they wanted to ban open carrying, they should have allowed concealed carrying, but they rejected that amendment twice. I think it was offered both in one committee and on the floor of the Senate as well. So that bill passed the floor of the Senate 28-9, and it's now in the House Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee. So that's kind of the other bill that's moved along the furthest, that it did pass the Senate side and is currently sitting in its first committee on the House side right now.
Now, why, and maybe I just don't understand, but why wouldn't you just, or is it already illegal? I expect it would be, to intimidate a polling official or someone at a polling place. I would assume that's already against the law. I
guess I would assume so too, that, in trying to stop somebody from voting, I guess I'm not familiar enough with all the laws regarding polling workers and things like that. But I guess they claim that they need this to stop people from using guns to intimidate. But I'm not aware of any instances of somebody using a firearm to intimidate somebody away from voting. So it's really just kind of this, they just see an opening to create a new gun-free zone. So they're just going for it. Because like I said, we kept pushing the amendment about concealed to allow people to continue to conceal carry to protect themselves, but that was rejected twice.
All right. Next bill up. So these two have both passed one of the houses, and that's a good sign given the period we're in right now, that they have plenty of time to pass if the powers that be want them to. So next bill.
Okay. So the next bill is House Bill 100. It is a 14-day waiting period bill. So what it means is when you go to your local firearms dealer to buy a firearm, you fill out what's known as a 4473. It's an ATF form. They then perform the background check, and once that comes back, assuming you're clean, which basically always happens. No criminals go to stores to fill out 4473.
Right.
So once that happens, this bill would make it so once you finish the background check, you would then have to wait 14 days before you could actually take the gun home. So you pay for the gun, you do the background check, but then you have to wait 2 weeks before you can actually take that gun home. So that's what House Bill 100 says. It's waiting for a vote on the House floor. It passed its first two committees, House Consumer and Public Affairs and House Judiciary. It was a little bit closer in House Judiciary. It only passed there 6-4. So this is this bill is one of our big priorities right now, and pushing back to try and stop it on the House floor. Because we're opposed to these arbitrary waiting periods. There's a saying, a right delayed is a right denied, and we have a right to own a firearms. I mean, that's been clear. That's the Supreme Court's been clear about that in D.C. versus Heller, McDonald versus Chicago, and Bruin versus New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. So the Supreme Court's consistently found that we have a right to own a firearm, and this bill would interfere with your ability to obtain a firearm when you want to do so, as is your right to do so. They're kind of the justification that kind of the sponsors claim is that this is supposed to stop impulse purchasing for someone who may want to commit suicide or commit a crime with a firearm. However, in states that do have waiting periods, there's very little evidence that these things actually do stop that kind of stuff, because oftentimes there's a lot more, when someone is actually going to go purchase a firearm specifically to do something, there's typically a lot more planning anyway, so a waiting period isn't necessarily going to deter them. And it's also worth saying that very, very few people buy a gun at an FFL to commit a crime. Almost the overwhelming majority of guns that are used to commit crimes come from the black market of firearms, which consists largely of stolen firearms. That's where the overwhelming majority of firearms that are used in crimes come from, is stolen firearms. So we don't really, I don't think we do anything to stop crime. I think our state, as I'm sure you're well aware, has some mental health challenges. We have very high rates of drug addiction. We have very high rates of alcoholism. And the bills that they've put forth so far, they claim that they need to restrict our Second Amendment rights to fix our mental health problems in our state. But their mental health, the mental health problems are so deeply ingrained in so many different parts of this state that it's not going to do anything but restrict law-abiding people's rights. So we're opposed to this bill. This is one of our big priorities right now, is trying to stop it on the floor of the House, and that is House Bill 100.
So it's coming to the floor of the House next?
Yes, that's where it's scheduled to go next. Okay.
Do you have any idea when that would happen? I know things are always in flux up there, but I assume is it on the House calendar or schedule at all?
It hasn't been put on it hasn't been scheduled for a vote yet. But as I'm sure you're well aware, particularly the second half of the session, things start moving kind of fast and furious. So it could be brought up for a vote here pretty soon, or it could be a little bit later. Particularly, there's a lot of vote counting going on, I think, on this bill right now. People trying to figure out where things are going to come down on it. So we're pushing pretty hard on this bill right now, and I know the governor, who's one of the proponents of this bill, she's pushing pretty hard on her end too. So there's a lot that's going on this bill right now. I would encourage people who are listening to this podcast to take the time to contact your state representative today and tell them you're opposed to this bill. There's really no evidence that this bill would reduce crimes or suicides, but it would delay. It would infringe on your right to own a firearm.
So other states have similar waiting periods. Is that something? No. So go ahead.
No state in the country has a 14-day waiting period. So I think Hawaii has like a 10-day waiting period, and that's currently the longest. Hawaii is actually a very, very anti-gun state. I don't know if people always realize that Hawaii is up there with California and New York for some of the worst gun laws in the country. So there's a couple states that have like 5-day waiting periods, some that have a week. Hawaii is the current worst with 10. This would, if it passes, would be the worst waiting period anywhere in the country, to have a 14-day waiting period, which we don't think we have a right to own a firearm. If you want to exercise the right, you should be able to. So they would be the longest in the country.
Now, do you have any idea of the legal situation regarding these waiting period laws? Have they been tested in court? Are they being tested in court? Where does that stand, do you think?
So where we're kind of at on that now is there's there's been some challenges in the past that haven't succeeded. However, we're now in what we call the post-Bruin environment. So a lot of what's going on in the debate right now, a lot of what we're talking about is the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, who is actually our sister organization in New York. They won at the Supreme Court against the Attorney General of New York, who at the time was Bruin. So what this does is in his opinion, while the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin dealt with may issue firearm permits as opposed to shall issue firearm permits like we have in New Mexico, Justice Thomas took lower courts to task for the way they've treated the Second Amendment as a second-class right. And he said, you need to cut it out and you need to use the test that was set up in Heller and all of these other random tests that lower courts have been using to determine whether or not a law is consistent with the Second Amendment and the Heller decision. So what we have seen since the Bruin decision is a lot of cases and a lot of laws that some of them which had stood for a while are now actually being struck down by federal judges. Now, we've seen stays against some of these because some of the laws that have been struck down have stood for decades, but there is a new legal environment post-Bruin, and I think that we probably will see more challenges to waiting period laws across the country, kind of in the quote-unquote post-Bruin environment that we now find ourselves in. So previously they've stood, but they haven't been retested under this new post-Bruin environment.
All right. Well, 14-day waiting period. You know, it strikes me that at some point a court is going to have to decide, 10 days, 14 days, 21 days, 28 days. Where is a waiting period reasonable and where is it a de facto ban on gun ownership?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. What's the next of the bad bills, presumably bad, on the agenda here?
So the next bill is House Bill 101, and that bill is currently in the House Judiciary Committee while they're working on a third committee substitute of the bill. So the bill started its life as potentially the worst gun control bill introduced anywhere in this country in the history of this country. That's
oh wow,
not hyperbole.
That's high praise indeed.
So under the original version of House Bill 101, it would make it a felony to own a semi-automatic rifle. No grandfather clause. You had to surrender your guns to the state or go to jail. That is what the bill said. It was you have to surrender your guns to the state or go to jail. We may have seen other versions introduced in other state legislatures, but I mean this was, and it dealt with magazines too. It wasn't just semi-automatic rifles. It was a large number of guns and magazines that basically it was destroy them, surrender them to the state or go to jail. That was what the original version of the bill was. So that was committee subbed for a bill that let you keep it, but then you had to register your semi-automatic rifles and magazines with the state while banning the sale of new semi-automatic rifles and magazines. And now they're working on some third version of the bill that they have yet to actually release to the public, so we really haven't been able to take a look at it yet. But this bill is still alive. We're pushing back really hard on it. It still would the last version that we've been able to see would still ban the sale of new semi-automatic rifles. That includes AR-15s, AK-47s, and kind of those type rifles. It would also ban the sale of 50 caliber rifles, which is a little bit quixotic. I'm not aware of anyone committing a crime with a 50 caliber rifle in New Mexico, or if they did, it was probably just like a one-time type deal. You don't really see 50 caliber rifles used to commit crime.
I'm not a gun expert nearly like you, but a 50 cal, that's kind of like what you'd mount on the back of a truck or something, right? That's a very significant weapon.
So you can own a 50 caliber rifle. Really, like it's more, you can use it for elephant hunting if that's the kind of thing you want to do. But I mean, that's kind of what these rifles are used for. It's a very, very heavy duty. It's a huge round. I mean, the amount of recoil off one of these rifles is huge. People enjoy shooting them. Some people really like those big caliber guns, but like I said, I'm not aware of any documentation that people are committing crimes with 50 caliber rifles. Even the rounds themselves these days can cost you $10 to $20 per round.
Wow.
This is a huge caliber rifle. You can't even hunt with it because it would just destroy most animals that you would actually even hunt with it. So it's really just enthusiasts and hobbyists who use these types of guns. A lot of historic guns actually are 50 caliber, like a lot of the ones that shoot ball, kind of like a musket that shoots a ball. Some of those are actually 50 caliber, and those would actually be banned by this bill as well. So it could actually ban historic reenactments in New Mexico, actually, which is a little bit something I don't think the sponsors quite thought about. But that was something that was in the bills, banning the sale of 50 caliber ammunition for rifles and 50 caliber rifles. So that was included in there as well. And that's, it's a bill that we strongly believe would be unconstitutional under the test set forward in Heller. We've pushed back on it really hard. Like I said, they're working on a third version of the bill right now, but it's currently within the House Judiciary Committee.
And just a couple things. One is because they've introduced multiple versions and changed it, that slows the process down. So that's some bit of good news. Can you briefly describe what a semi-automatic rifle means?
Okay, yeah. So a semi-automatic rifle is a rifle, meaning that has a stock. It has a barrel of 18 inches or longer. And what semi-automatic means is you pull the trigger and one round is discharged. You then release the trigger. The trigger resets and you get to pull it again, and another round is discharged. So you pull the trigger one time for each bullet being discharged from the firearm. Fully automatic would be you hold down the trigger and multiple rounds are discharged, whereas in semi-automatic, if you hold down the trigger, you still only shoot one because you have to release the trigger before it starts, before you can shoot another round. So it's one round per pull of the trigger. Is what it is. So the AR-15 is a semi-automatic rifle. It's actually the most common rifle in America these days. It's a very modular weapon. It's very easy to use. And semi-automatic rifles, due to the nature of it, where it uses the recoil of the round to help load the next round, it actually has less recoil than other types of rifles. So they're pretty easy to use in that regard for shooters who may not like to deal with a recoil from larger rifles. Got it.
Yeah, I just figured it's worth clearing that up because semi-automatic often gets lumped in with automatic, and it's just worth making sure that people are aware of what that means. All right, next up legislatively.
So there's a bit. I'll just kind of go through the next couple of bills a little bit faster because those are kind of the bigger priority bills that we have. There's another bill, House Bill 72, that deals with what you call "quote unquote" semi-automatic firearm converters. So there's I think what the bill is trying to target is people who illegally convert their semi-automatic handguns and rifles to shoot fully automatic. That's already a federal crime to convert it without doing all the right federal paperwork. So it's a bill that it's been pushed, but it's so ambiguous that the expert witnesses for the bill couldn't actually answer basic questions about it. So that bill is currently working on in a second committee subversion. It's still stuck in House Judiciary and has yet to be scheduled for a hearing. So that's a bill that we're opposed to it because it's so ambiguous. It could ban a bunch of stuff or it could ban nothing at all. Even if they intend to target something that is already illegal to own. So we're opposed to it, and it's currently kind of languishing in House Judiciary and has yet to be scheduled for another hearing. There's another magazine ban, House Bill 50, that's still stuck in its first committee. The sponsor of that bill decided to kind of hold back on it, and endorse House Bill 101 in its place. House Bill 50, which would ban owning a magazine that holds more than 9 rounds. On
right.
the Senate side, we also have Senate Bill 116, which would ban anyone under the age of 21 from purchasing any semi-automatic weapon, whether that's semi-automatic shotguns or semi-automatic rifles, because they do make semi-automatic shotguns. They offer some of them are magazine fed, but a lot of them still have it in the tube, so they look very similar to a pump action shotgun. But instead of a pump action to load the rounds, it's just a semi-automatic action that uses the recoil to load the next round. They're quite popular for hunting, particularly if you're doing a lot of shooting. With a shotgun, that recoil starts to hurt your shoulder a bit if you're doing a lot of shooting with it. So that semi-automatic function kind of reduces some of that recoil. So it's a little bit easier to shoot if you're doing a lot of shooting, particularly hunting. Senate Bill 171 is a kind of a weird bill. It's kind of this kitchen sink of things that they want to ban. It would ban AR pistols and AK pistols, which are it's an AR-15, but instead of being stamped as a rifle, it's being stamped as a pistol. So it's technically a pistol. You cannot put a stock on it, or you would be committing a felony, because then you would be owning a short-barreled rifle. So it's technically a pistol, but they're not very commonly used. They're becoming more popular now, but it would make it a felony to own those, and make it a felony to own a suppressor. It would also make it a felony to own any type of NFA firearm. So when I say NFA firearm, I mean short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and fully automatic weapons, because we can own fully automatic weapons. It's just very hard and expensive to do so. So that's Senate Bill 171. So Senate Bill 171 and Senate Bill 116 that I just talked about, those are both in the Senate Judiciary Committee right now. They passed out of their first committee weeks ago and have just been sitting in Senate Judiciary and have yet to be scheduled for a vote. So those bills are kind of sitting in Senate Judiciary right now. So that they're there with House Bill 9 as well in Senate Judiciary. So we're kind of watching those bills to see if anything happens with them, whereas we kind of expect that House Bill 9 would be the one that would get priority to be heard, whereas these other bills it's not clear right now if and when they're going to be heard, because like I said, they've already been in Senate Judiciary for a couple weeks now. There's 2 new bills that were just filed right before the deadline. Senate Bill 427 and Senate Bill 428, both of them filed by Senator Joe Cervantes, who is the chair of the very influential chair of Senate Judiciary. Senate Bill 427 would be another 14-day waiting period, just uses a little bit different language to impose a 14-day waiting period. And then Senate Bill 428 is a gun manufacturer and retailer liability bill, meaning that it would attempt to make it easier to sue a firearm retailer or gun manufacturer in the state of New Mexico. So it's a little bit odd in that, there's a federal law known as the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, or PLCAA, which kind of says, you can't sue a gun retailer or gun manufacturer for the criminal actions of a third party. And I do want to kind of pause right here, and when talking about this, is if a gun manufacturer or a retailer is doing something illegal, they can be civilly sued for it. If a retailer is selling guns to someone they know can't legally own them, or they know it's a straw purchase, they can be sued for it. They're not complete. The idea that gun manufacturers and retailers are exempt from being sued is not true. If they're doing something illegal themselves, they can be sued. And and retailers and manufacturers in this country who have done illegal things have been sued before successfully. Like I said, if they're doing a sale if they know a sale is a straw purchase meaning someone who can pass a background check is buying it for someone who can't pass a background check. If they know it's a straw purchase, they can be sued over that. So if they're doing something illegal, they already can be sued. What this bill would try to do is try and make it such that you can sue them for the actions of a third party. So someone goes there, buys a gun from a retailer, or gets a gun from a manufacturer, and uses that gun to commit a crime, then you could sue the retailer or manufacturer. That's what they're trying to do in this bill. Senator Joe Cervantes, who is a trial attorney, is the one who's sponsoring that bill. And, he's sponsored a number of bills in the past that deal with making it easier to sue people. But I guess, that's his ability to do so in his position in the legislature. So that's probably an ethical question for other people to discuss, but it's just kind of something we've noticed in a couple of different bills before.
Wow. Well, anything else, or are we finally there?
I think we're finally there. There's two other bills that we don't think are going to be heard right now: House Bill 224 and House Bill 238. They kind of make crimes around discharging firearms in quote unquote densely populated areas, but most counties and municipalities already have rules around discharging firearms within city limits. So I don't think it would really do anything. But it would potentially ban indoor shooting ranges, such that there's a couple indoor shooting ranges around our state, some in Albuquerque and a few other in some smaller towns as well. So that's a bill. We've been pushing back on those. They were scheduled to be heard in our first committee, but they were pulled off the schedule and have yet to be rescheduled. So there's kind of a rundown of all the bills, although kind of the bills that we're watching right now. There's a couple of, there's probably another 20 bills that deal in some way with guns, but they're not necessarily the anti-gun bills that we're really carefully watching on these. So that's those are a priority bill list that we're watching.
All right. Well, folks, get involved, send the legislators information and notes, emails, show up to testify. We're going to put the whole list here in the podcast notes for folks to use. And I appreciate your time, Zack, and all your tireless efforts here to try to limit the damage of some of these anti-gun proposals. Any final thoughts before we go here?
No, I mean, I just encourage people to get involved on stuff. I know it can be disheartening at times to deal with in the Mexico legislature, particularly if you come from a more conservative or libertarian perspective. But we don't really have a choice, because if we don't engage, things are going to be so much worse. So I really would encourage people to get engaged and get other people engaged as well. I think that there's too often people fall into this mindset of we're just going to give up. But if we give up, things are going to get way, way, way worse than I think that than things would otherwise be. So I really do encourage people to get involved. It can be frustrating at times, but I think we have a better shot of stopping some of these bills than people may realize. So people really do need to get involved, because it does make a difference. All
right. Well, Zack, what's the website for the shooting sports?
So our website is nmfsa.org. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as New Mexico Shooting Sports Association.
All right. Appreciate your time, and we'll see how things pan out this session. Maybe we'll have you back to just do a recap. But thanks for listening to this week's episode. Okay. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show. All right, Zack, appreciate it. Glad we could get it.